My question was regarding the Eucharist. I am in RCIA. I live in the South, and there's a lot of Baptists. One of the things that people like to throw at you a lot is about the Eucharist is, oh, well, if you believe in Jesus, like, is it cannibalism? And I just never know how to respond to that. So I was just wondering if there's, like, a good way to respond to that kind of rebuttal, I guess.
I love it when people accuse us of cannibalism for this simple reason. We know as a matter of historical fact that the early Christians were accused of cannibalism for their beliefs on the Eucharist. You can see this in an ancient document called Octavius by a guy by the name of Municius Felix, who is writing against the church and accusing Christians of being cannibals. And his claim is that they cover baby Jesus with grain and then eat him. So he's fairly confusing, like, the nativity scene and the Eucharist. But you can see, like, oh, I see the real thing he's getting wrong here. And you can see how he kind of goes off the rails with it. So I would say this, like, if your beliefs about the Eucharist couldn't be mistaken for cannibalism, then you don't believe what the early Christians believed. Like, just as a matter of fact. Second, well, how do we know that this isn't cannibalism? Well, because cannibalism is destructive. Like, only a pedant would call it cannibalism if you, like, chew your fingernails. Cannibalism is like destruction of a body. And that's not what's happening. Like, when you receive the Eucharist, it isn't as if Jesus's body is now 4 grams lighter than it was before. That's not correct. And the reason for it has to do with the deeper theology of what's sometimes called substance and accidents. That Christ is bodily present in the Eucharist, but not in the same way that he's bodily present in heaven. He's bodily present in a different way. And so, because of the difference in his mode of presence, what's happening there is not destroying his body, and is not cannibalism. That's pretty deep waters theologically. Now, if you're willing, I would love to send you a copy of my book, The Eucharist is Really Jesus, in which I get into, like, how do we understand this, and why isn't it cannibalism? St. Augustine, when he's looking at John 6:63, where Jesus says, it is the spirit that gives life, the flesh is of no avail. He makes the point that it's not that Jesus's flesh is of no avail. That would be heretical. Jesus just said that he's going to give his flesh for the life of the world just a few verses earlier in John 6:51. Rather, it is our fleshly understanding that is of no avail. So thinking of eating Jesus's body and blood in the way you might think of eating a steak, that kind of corporeal understanding is not how to understand the Eucharist. And so Protestants raising this objection, ironically, are falling into the very thing Jesus warns not to do in John 6:63 by taking an overly human understanding of how we eat Jesus's flesh and drink his blood. That rather they need to be enlightened by the Spirit to say, yes, this truly is his flesh and blood, but the manner in which we receive him is not the same as the manner in which we, receive a taco. Does that help give any clarity there?
That does. Thank you so much.
They stay on the line, and we'll give you a copy of the book.
It's awesome. It's definitely a hard thing to comprehend, and thinking about that just reminds me about how a lot of people who believe in sola scriptura will argue that, like, it's just a metaphor, but I don't think it says in the scripture that it's a metaphor.
What? Let's actually, if you're willing to stick around, I want to give just a little more.
Of course.
Because I love talking about John 6. So you're right. It is a hard saying. This is what people say in response to Jesus' Eucharistic teaching in John 6:60. If your Eucharistic theology isn't hard to accept, it's not what Jesus taught. Like the Protestant view is just a symbol. That's easy to accept. That's nothing. Like the disciples of Jesus who stuck around in John 5 when he declared himself Lord of the Sabbath and called himself the Son of God, making himself equal with God, they were fine accepting that. And then they're supposed to leave over some vague metaphor about belief? Give me a break. The fact that this is a hard teaching and Jesus loses disciples over it tells us he's presenting something really radical. Now, I can already hear the objection. Sometimes when Jesus talks, he's speaking metaphorically and people think he's speaking literally. Absolutely, that's fair. But when you go line by line through John 6 and look at every time Jesus presents a teaching and then say, okay, how do the crowds respond and what do they think he means? It's really striking. when Jesus says that he's the bread come down from heaven, they just think originally that he's talking about, free food. But then when he clarifies that he is the bread that comes down from heaven, well, now they still take the bread part as just a metaphor and just think Jesus means that he's coming down from heaven, which is what many Protestants seem to think Jesus means here in John 6. Jesus clarifies that you have to actually eat his flesh. And then they get horrified and said, well, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? And then Jesus says, unless you gnaw his flesh and drink his blood. Now, think about it. Drinking blood is gross. Drinking blood, even animal blood, was also prohibited under Jewish law. And so he's doubling down and doubling down and doubling down. If all of that is just a bad metaphor for belief or something, what in the world is he doing? He's teaching in entirely the wrong way. Like, if I'm trying to use a figure of speech, and every time somebody clarifies, like, okay, you just mean a figure of speech, I'm like, no, literally, my flesh is truly food. My blood is truly drink, which is what he says. Why does he keep clarifying that it's not a metaphor if he means that this is all just a big metaphor? So, like, reading John 6 shows he does not mean this in a merely metaphorical, symbolic way. But neither does he mean it in the way that we eat ordinary food, or the way we would eat human flesh if we were cannibals.
Ada, I'm going to say thanks, but don't go anywhere. Hang on. I'm just going to put you on hold, and Edgar will pick up and get your address, and we'll send you The Eucharist is Really Jesus. And as more questions come up, if you call, we would love to help you answer them. That's what makes the show fun, and it was also just very nice to talk with you.